Hello and welcome to Exploring the Violin. I'm Ethan Adelsman. Today we're going to be covering left-hand finger placement and also practicing how often to do it and how to do it. If this is your first time here, please like this video and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our content in the future. All right, let's get started. Okay, so before we talk about left-hand finger placement, I want to get into this a little bit. This is something I should have mentioned when I was doing the bow and bow hold, and it totally slipped my mind. The horsehair. This is very important that you do not touch the horsehair with your hands or any part of your body, your face, your arm, your elbow, anything should not actually touch the horsehair. And the reason for that is because your hand and your body has trace amounts of oils on your skin, on the surface of your skin. And what happens is that gets on the bow and it prevents the rosin from sticking to the bow in the spots that the oils have built up. You can see this in this area right here. That is where my thumb has touched the bow enough to where the oils have caused the rosin not to stick right there. If you touch the bow other places, they'll get spots like that too over time. And I've seen this with students who grab their bow up here quite a bit. You'll see, there are spots where the rosin won't stick. So what happens with that, it sounds like this. It doesn't make a sound. It doesn't actually make the sound that we want. It's just like naked horsehair. It doesn't have any rosin on it. So that is why you don't touch the horsehair. Without further ado, let's get into how to place your fingers properly on the violin. So you're holding your violin in playing position. I'm going to go ahead and turn a little bit just so that you can see what it is that my left hand is doing. Okay. Now, you want to bring up your left hand to the violin, to the neck of the violin, and where the base of your first finger knuckle is, you want that to be right next to, there's a piece called the nut, which is what your strings first start going over at the top of the neck. So you want your first finger, this is your first finger. In violin, you've only got 4 fingers that you use to play with, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so your first finger, it's right next to the neck, and now your thumb, unlike with the bow, you don't want to have a bumpy thumb. You don't want to have a bent thumb. This thumb should be straight, and it should touch just like that. You don't want it to come up too high above the neck of the fingerboard. You want it to be just peeking over just a little bit, right? Like that. Okay. So the fingers. When you put your hand here, you do not want to squeeze too hard on the neck, because similar to your bow, you're gonna have a hard time making a good sound when you're squeezing too hard. You're going to have a hard time playing in tune. You're going to have a hard time controlling your fingers if they're not at least most of the way relaxed. Okay? So what we're going to do is take your first finger, and with that base of your knuckle right by the nut there, you're going to take your first finger and you're going to bend it over onto the string like this. And you'll notice it looks boxy. I call it squared off fingers. So it looks very boxy and the top of it is flat. You don't want to have a collapsed finger like this. Your finger may tend to do that initially, but especially with the first finger, you just want to drop it right down onto the fingerboard from that position. And that will be, I was a little flat, but that's B. So on the A string, you play A, and your first finger is going to play B. Second finger goes down in a similar way to the first finger. What you're going to do is drop it down, and you want it to also be squared. Now, the second finger, there's distance between the second finger and the first finger, right? So there's a space of about 1 finger between. And that's because the second finger is playing C sharp. So this is C sharp. And then the third finger, you're going to put that similarly to the second finger and the first finger. Again, you want to square squared off top of your fingers, and your third finger is going to play D, and that is actually right next to your second finger, right? So there's a gap between the first and second finger, and then the third finger and the second finger are close to each other. That's what the pattern looks like for those three fingers. You also want to make sure, this is a very important point, you want to make sure that your wrist is not collapsing like so. Your wrist is straight and not pancaking. This is a very common mistake I see with beginners, that your wrist is flattening out or pancaking, as I say. So make sure the wrist is straight like this, and then when you place the fingers, they will be in the right place. If your wrist is like this, you see how much further back your finger actually is than if it's straight. You can see how that would affect the angle of the string, of the finger on the string. So, very important, make sure your wrist is straight, or else. Here's a little song that you can play to work on placing your fingers on the violin. So that is building up the neck of the violin and then back down. And you notice I didn't use my fourth finger. We're not going to worry about the fourth finger for now. We will learn that later. But it goes down in a very similar way to the other fingers. You want to make sure that the top is flat and the fingers are not collapsing. Especially that fourth finger tends to collapse more than the others because it's the weakest. You know, you can do those pinky poppers, those finger poppers exercises to work on strengthening your left hand as well, and those are very effective for this. Another thing to keep in mind with your left hand is your fingernails. You may notice my fingernails are very short. If you usually have longer nails, you want to keep them very, very short for playing the violin. I trim mine every 2 to 3 days. I just have to go in and trim them because otherwise my nails will get in the way of me putting my fingers down in a square fashion. So they get in the way. The nails, you just want to keep short nails. That is placing your fingers and your left hand on the violin. Okay, so let's talk about practicing. Practicing is very important with the violin because if you don't practice, just like with anything you're trying to learn or doing, if you don't practice, then you don't make any real progress, or your progress will be slower. And how much you practice is up to you. It's how quickly you want to advance with the violin. If you want to advance more quickly, then you'll practice more. And that is generally true. That is generally considered to be true. However, I will say this about it. I have learned that just practicing is not enough. If I practice and my mind is elsewhere, if I'm thinking about what I had for breakfast or what I'm going to do later in the day, and I'm just practicing to get it done, then that is not effective practicing. I might as well not be practicing at that point. It's gonna do me some good, but it's not gonna be as beneficial as really focused, concentrated practice. Now, this is a double-edged sword because when you're focusing and concentrating very, very well, hard on practicing, then two other side effects can happen. One, you can get a lot of tension in your body, in your shoulders, in your arms, in your hands. If you're like really focusing on really playing, practicing and focusing really hard on it, then that tension can creep in. I find that in my own playing. The other part of the double-edged sword is that mentally, you get exhausted from this. Your brain gets tired and fatigued pretty quickly if you're practicing really focused. So the most that I can really do solid, focused, really concentrated practice for is about 45 minutes, maybe an hour at a time. That's the most. And if you're just starting, I think 15 minutes of concentrated, focused practice at any given time is about the most you should be doing. So, and if you're really focusing, you'll find that your brain gets tired quickly. As far as how often to practice, I like this. Dr. Suzuki, I believe it was Dr. Suzuki said, and if you don't know about Dr. Suzuki, look him up. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. He wrote some incredible books, including Nurtured by Love. This is a fantastic book about learning to play the violin in the way that he teaches it. But what he said about practicing is very, very, very cool to me. He said, someone asked him once, how often should we practice? And he said, only on days you eat. So there you go. Practice only on the days you eat. An alternative to that, I've heard this said, practice on days that end in Y. So basically, every day. I have actually found that it's good for me to take a little break every now and then, take a day off, to help my body recover. And mentally, when I come back to it, a lot of times I find that I am playing certain areas or certain passages, certain things that I was trying really hard to play. If I give myself a break and come back, I find them much easier to approach. Focused practice, relaxed practice, and also, very important tip, go slow. It's easy to start playing something too fast and then to start just kind of what I call just sawing away at it. Like you're trying to learn this fast passage and you're playing it super fast, right? To where you're getting all these flubs and mistakes. It's much more effective to take it slow and think about loose, relaxed arms, relaxed shoulders, relaxed left hand, relaxed right hand. Think about these things before you start to play. Concentrate on them first. This is great to do when you're playing scales. And then when you play them slowly, your muscles will remember how to do it correctly. And then you can go back and do it faster. But you've got to do a lot of repetitions slowly before you can play quickly. All right, let's take a look at a recap video, again, going over everything that we've covered today. All right, so that'll bring us to the end of the lesson today. Thank you for watching. Again, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time on Exploring the Violin.